I have always been drawn to the bizarre. While most amateur photographers seek to capture breathtaking landscapes or the perfect smile on a happy face, I have always been on the hunt for what most consider strange, disturbing. There's something about darkness, distortion, that fascinates me in a way I can't explain. And that was exactly what led me to open that anonymous email. It was an ordinary night. I was sitting in my chair, reviewing some photos I took during the day. Nothing too special, just worn-out urban scenes, shadows cast on cracked walls, details that almost no one notices. Then the sound of an email notification snapped me out of my trance. A new message with no subject, just an unknown sender. Curious, I opened the email. There was no text, just an attachment. The file name was simple, SMILE.jpg. My heart raced, a mix of excitement and unease. I love unusual images, and one with a name like that, I had to see it. I clicked on the attachment, and the image opened almost instantly. At first, there was nothing too remarkable. Just a dog, a Siberian husky, sitting somewhere dark, its figure partially obscured by shadows. But what stood out was the smile. A smile that, at first glance, seemed harmless, but the more I looked at it, the more it unsettled me. There was something wrong with it. The smile looked human, and the dog's eyes, fixed on me, seemed to be watching me back, as if it knew I was there, on the other side of the screen. For a moment, I thought about deleting the image. An inexplicable sense of discomfort washed over me, but at the same time, there was a morbid curiosity. I needed to know more. Maybe it was some kind of digital art, an attempt to provoke a visceral reaction in the viewer. I thought some colleagues might find it interesting too. Without much thought, I saved the image and sent it to a few friends who shared my taste for the bizarre. The response was immediate. Some found the image disturbing but intriguing. Others said the sense of discomfort was almost physical, like the dog was about to jump out of the screen. We laughed it off, thinking it was just a psychological trick, something harmless. That night, however, the discomfort didn't leave me. I went to sleep with the image still fresh in my mind, the dog's eyes seeming to follow me even when I closed my own. In the middle of the night, I woke up from a nightmare. I was sweating cold, my heart racing. In the dream, I was in the same dark place where the photo seemed to have been taken. I could feel the weight of the shadows around me, and that smile, always present, always watching me. When I woke up, I tried to push the dream out of my mind, convincing myself it was just the effect of the disturbing image. But as I tried to go back to sleep, I felt a presence in the room. Something was wrong. The air was heavier, and the silence seemed to pulse. I wasn't alone. Slowly, I turned my head toward the bedroom door, which was ajar. And there, in the dim light, I saw the outline of something that shouldn't have been there. Two bright spots, like eyes reflecting the faint light coming through the window. My heart almost stopped, and for a moment, I swore I saw that smile in the dark. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and when I looked again, there was nothing, just the bedroom door gently swaying. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. Somehow, I knew that image had brought something with it, something that was now with me in my house and that had no intention of leaving. I woke up exhausted, but with a determination. I needed to understand what that was, where it came from. I called one of the friends I had sent the picture to, but he didn't answer. I tried other numbers, but the same thing. Everyone who had seen the image seemed to have disappeared. The discomfort grew, turning into palpable fear. I needed to know what was happening before it was too late. The next day began with a sense of strangeness I couldn't shake. The world around me seemed slightly distorted, like a thin veil of unreality was overlaid on my daily routine. Every sound was sharper, every shadow darker, and that image of the smiling dog remained in my mind, like a parasite lodged deep in my consciousness. I decided to investigate. Something inside me screamed that the photo wasn't ordinary, that there was more behind that image than I could understand. I sat in front of the computer and started searching. I used every resource at my disposal, looking for any mention of SMILE.jpg, any clue about its origin. After a few hours of research, I finally found an obscure forum specializing in internet mysteries where someone mentioned the image. The post was old, dated several years back. The person who wrote it talked about a similar experience to mine. An anonymous email, the image of a smiling dog, and after that, nightmares and a growing sense of being followed. The author of the post described increasingly intense visions until they finally stopped posting. The other forum members speculated about what might have happened to them, but no one seemed to know for sure. I sat there, staring at the screen for a long time. My heart pounded in my chest as I read and reread the words. The idea that others had gone through this before me, and that they might have succumbed to some malevolent force, left me on the brink of panic. But I needed to understand more. I kept reading, diving into accounts that ranged from classic horror stories to bizarre conspiracy theories. Some said the image was a form of cursed art, created by a disturbed artist who put a part of his soul into it. Others believed it was a tool of supernatural entities used to lure victims into a spiritual trap. There were even those who argued that the image was some kind of computer virus that infected the human mind instead of machines, exploiting the vulnerabilities of our subconscious. The more I read, the more the feeling of unease grew. My eyes burned, and my head throbbed from the amount of information I was absorbing. Each new discovery only seemed to confirm what I already suspected. This was not just an image. It was a door, an entryway to something much larger and much darker. However, one question remained unanswered. Why me? What made me different from all those who disappeared? Did I just have more time before the inevitable happened? I needed to find the others who received the image. Maybe together we could find a way to stop it. I decided to visit my friend Marcos, one of the first people I sent the picture to. He was a skeptical guy, the type who doesn't believe anything until he sees it with his own eyes. Maybe he had some idea, some rational explanation for what was happening. I called him, but again there was no answer. I decided to go to his house. When I arrived, the place was eerily quiet. There was no sign of life, no lights on. I knocked on the door, called out to him, but the only response was the echo of my own voice. The door was unlocked, which was strange because Marcos had always been very careful with security. I entered hesitantly, my heart racing. The house was in complete disarray. Papers scattered, furniture out of place, as if a struggle had taken place there. But what really left me frozen was Marcos's computer, still on, with the screen frozen on the image of SMILE.jpg, the same one I had sent him. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. It was as if the dog's smile had widened, distorting in a way that seemed almost impossible. It looked larger, more menacing, as if something was growing behind that canine expression. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I felt as if I was being pulled into the screen, into that smile. That's when I heard a noise upstairs, a heavy creak, like the sound of feet dragging across the floor. Calling out to Marcos once more, I climbed the stairs, my heart pounding like a drum. At the end of the hallway, a door was slightly ajar from where the sound was coming. With each step I took, the noise grew clearer but also more disturbing, like something or someone was trying to move but couldn't. I pushed the door open, feeling a strange resistance, like something in the air was holding me back. When I finally managed to open it, I found Marcos. He was standing, but he didn't seem to see me. His eyes were glazed over, fixed on something ahead, and his body trembled slightly. But what scared me the most was the smile forming on his lips, a grotesque reflection of the smile in the image still open on the computer downstairs. I called out to him, but there was no response. I slowly approached, trying to understand what was happening. When I touched his shoulder, he finally turned to me, but his eyes, they were empty, as if he was no longer there. The smile remained, frozen on his face, a grotesque parody of happiness. A chill ran down my spine. Something had taken hold of Marcos, something I couldn't comprehend. And then, without warning, he let out a horrible, guttural scream that echoed through the walls, as if something was being torn out of him. I ran out, the sound still ringing in my ears, unable to process what had just happened. That night, I returned home, locking all the doors and windows as if that could keep the evil out. But I knew, deep down, that I wasn't safe. Something was following me, something that had been unleashed by that image. As I threw myself onto the bed, in a futile attempt to forget everything, the sound of Marcos's scream continued to echo in my mind. And deep down, I knew he was lost, just like everyone else who saw the image. And now, it was up to me to find out if there was any way out before it was my turn to disappear. The following days passed in a dense fog, as if time had lost its meaning. The incident at Marcos's house continued to haunt me, replaying in my mind like a broken tape, always returning to the moment when he let out that horrible scream. I tried in every way to erase that image from my brain, but it was impossible. The dog's smile, Marcos's empty expression, everything was ingrained in me, corroding any trace of peace I might have had. I went back to the forum where I had found the first clues about the image, hoping to discover something new. I combed through every post, every comment, but nothing seemed to give me a clear direction. Theories were many, but none offered a solution. One thing, however, was certain. Everyone who saw the image seemed to end up the same way, disappearing, going insane, or both. And every story ended abruptly, as if the authors had been silenced before revealing the conclusion. I then decided that the only way to try to understand and, who knows, escape would be to find the creator of the image, the one responsible for spreading that curse. Maybe, somehow, he had the answers I needed, or at least could tell me how it all began. The clues were scarce, but one name kept appearing in the discussions: William Ainsworth. They said he was an eccentric photographer, a man obsessed with the grotesque and the macabre. There were rumors that he had isolated himself from the world after creating a work he himself considered too dangerous to be seen. Some believed that SMILE.JPG was that work. I found an old address that supposedly belonged to him, a house on the outskirts of the city. There were no guarantees he was still there or even alive, but I had no other option. I had to try. The road to the house was almost deserted, a winding path that seemed to lead out of the known world. The trees around were darker, as if they absorbed the sunlight, and the silence was almost absolute, broken only by the sound of my own footsteps on the wet grass. When the house finally appeared before me, an old and decaying structure, I felt a chill run down my spine. It was the kind of place that, under other circumstances, I would have found fascinating. But now all I could feel was fear. The exterior of the house was covered in vegetation, as if nature itself was trying to swallow the place. The windows were broken, and the wood of the walls was rotting, exuding a smell of mold and decay. Still, there was something strange in the air, a feeling that I was being watched. I took a deep breath and, with trembling determination, approached the door. When I touched it, the wood gave way easily, revealing an interior as chaotic as the exterior. The smell of rot was even stronger here, mixed with the scent of ancient dust and something I couldn't identify but made me nauseous. My instinct told me to leave, but there was something pulling me in, a desperate need to find answers. The interior of the house was a maze of abandoned rooms, filled with broken furniture and piles of papers scattered across the floor. The walls were covered in photographs, but they all seemed distorted, as if time had blurred the images or as if reality itself had been manipulated. In each of them, one detail disturbed me. A subtle but unmistakable smile that appeared in some corner, sometimes in a figure in the background, other times as a shadow in the middle of a crowd. It was as if the dog's smile had infiltrated each of these images, spreading like a virus. Finally, I found a room different from the others. The door was ajar, and a faint light escaped from it. When I pushed it open, I found an old man sitting in a chair, surrounded by candles. His appearance was even more deteriorated than the house. Pale and wrinkled skin, disheveled hair, and the eyes. The eyes were empty like Marcos's. He looked at me, but didn't seem to see me, as if he was trapped somewhere between the present and a nightmare he couldn't escape from. "You came." His voice was hoarse, weak, as if each word took effort. I knew someone would come. I stood still, unable to respond. Fear dominated me, but the need to know kept me steady. "William Ainsworth?" I asked finally. He nodded, an almost imperceptible movement. "What did you do?" My voice came out louder than I intended, filled with a mix of anger and desperation. "What is this image?" He laughed, a dry and bitter sound that echoed off the walls of the room. "The image, it's more than you can imagine." He looked at one of the candles, his eyes fixed on the flickering flame. "I created it, but I didn't know what I was creating. Not until it was too late." "What do you mean?" I insisted, feeling the frustration grow. "How do we stop this?" Ainsworth shook his head slowly, as if he were hearing something distant. "There is no way to stop it. It's not just an image. It's a portal, a door to something beyond this world. Something that has always been waiting, hungry, and now, through it, it feeds on us." "But why? Why did you do this?" "I wanted to create something unique, something that transcended art." His eyes widened, a latent madness in them. "And I did. But the price was my soul, and now yours too." He stood up with difficulty, his legs trembling, and pointed to a corner of the room. "It's there, the original. It all started with it." I followed his gesture, and my gaze fell on a framed photograph hanging on the wall. It was the same image I received by email, but something about it was different. The dog's smile seemed more real, more alive, and the eyes were now completely focused on me, as if they recognized me. "Leave while you still can," Ainsworth whispered, his voice almost inaudible. "But know that it has already marked you. No matter where you go, it will find you." Before I could react, the candles around the room began to go out one by one, plunging the place into darkness. The sound of a strong wind started reverberating through the walls, and I felt the temperature drop drastically. Something was approaching. I ran out of the house, fear pushing me out. When I finally reached the road, I looked back and saw that the house was engulfed in shadows, as if it was being devoured by darkness. Ainsworth's words echoed in my mind. "It will find you." That night, back in my apartment, the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. The silence was oppressive, and I knew that, somehow, I had brought something with me. I sat in front of the computer, determined to delete all the copies of the image I had. But when I tried to delete it, an error message appeared. And then, I heard a sound coming from behind me, a low, guttural sound that chilled my blood. I slowly turned around and saw a figure in the dim light, two bright points staring at me intently. The dog's smile, now clearer than ever, appeared in the darkness, and I knew that my only chance of escape had vanished. All I could do was wait for the inevitable. The guttural sound continued to resonate in the room, a low, constant noise, like irregular breathing, getting closer and closer. My body was paralyzed with terror, as if an invisible force was preventing me from moving. All I could do was look at those two bright eyes, fixed on me in the darkness. The sinister smile, which was once just an image on the screen, was now right there in front of me, taking shape in the real world. My hands trembled as I tried to reach for my phone on the table. I needed to do something, anything, to escape. But as I moved, the sound grew louder, accompanying my every movement. as if the creature was aware of my fear. In the back of my mind, a voice whispered that it was useless to fight, that I was already marked, as Ainsworth had said. But the will to survive was stronger. There was still a part of me that refused to accept the fate that was approaching. In a final act of desperation, I abruptly stood up and ran towards the bedroom door, trying to escape the oppressive presence. But as soon as my hand touched the doorknob, the room seemed to warp around me. The walls curved, the floor wobbled beneath my feet, and a vertigo hit me with full force. It was as if the space was being manipulated, twisted by a force beyond my comprehension. I fell to my knees, fighting against the nausea that was taking over me. And then I saw it, emerging from the darkness, the distorted smile becoming more and more evident. The dog, now fully materialized, was just a few meters away from me. Its body was a shapeless mass of shadows, something that seemed to change form constantly. But the smile, that macabre smile, was the only constant. The eyes, bright and hungry, were fixed on mine, as if they were absorbing every fragment of my soul. Ainsworth's words echoed in my mind. It is a portal. I realized, at that moment, that the creature before me was not just a possessed animal or a common entity. It was the manifestation of something much older and more malevolent, something that used the image as a means to enter this world, to devour all those who dared to look at it. The dog began to move towards me, each step silent but full of intent. My vision was blurring, and a deep sense of hopelessness took over me. I knew I couldn't escape. There was no way to flee from something that was beyond human comprehension, something that existed in a dimension where the laws of physics, time, and reality simply didn't apply. But then, an insane idea crossed my mind. What if the only way to escape was through the image itself? What if, somehow, I could reverse the process, use the portal against it? With the little strength I had left, I crawled back to the computer, where the image was still open on the screen. The dog stopped, watching me with a disturbing interest, as if it knew what I was trying to do. My hands could barely hold the mouse, but I managed to open the image editor. The screen flickered, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw the smile widen, as if the creature was mocking me. I tried to make changes to the image, distort the smile, erase the eyes, anything that could break the connection with the creature. But each time I applied a change, the image restored itself, returning to its original state, as if it was protected by an indestructible force. The dog moved even closer, and I could feel its presence almost tangible, like a crushing weight in the air around me. The room grew even darker, as if the very light was being sucked in by the creature. And then, I realized something even more horrifying. The image on the screen, which was once a static representation of the dog, was now moving, in sync with the monster in front of me. The connection between the image and the creature was stronger than I could have imagined. I was trying to fight something that couldn't be defeated by conventional means. And deep down, I knew that the image wasn't just a portal, but a physical manifestation of the very evil that was trying to consume me. In a final act of desperation, I closed the image editor and opened a new email. I didn't know what else to do, but a primal instinct told me I needed to pass the curse on, as if that might somehow free me. I quickly wrote a message, attaching the SMILE.jpg image, and sent it to a random address I found in my contacts. As soon as the email was sent, the creature stopped, as if it was waiting. But what happened next was worse than anything I could have imagined. The dog began to disappear, dissolving into shadows that merged with the surrounding darkness. But at the same time, I felt something break inside me, as if a part of my very soul was being ripped out. The pain was unbearable, and the last thing I heard before losing consciousness was the sound of laughter, echoing in the air, as if the very world was mocking my attempt to escape. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of my room. The house was silent, and sunlight was streaming through the window, bathing everything in a deceptive calm. But I knew that nothing was right. The dog was gone. The smile.jpg image was no longer on my computer, and the email I had sent was not in my sent box. It was as if everything had been a nightmare. But there was something different inside me, a feeling of emptiness, of something missing. I looked around, trying to find some sign of what had happened, but everything seemed normal, almost peaceful. However, deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Something had changed, something irreversible. I left the house, trying to resume my life, pretending nothing had happened. But the feeling of being watched never left me. There was always a strange reflection in mirrors, a shadow that shouldn't be there. And every now and then, in the moments of greatest silence, I would hear that guttural sound, coming from somewhere distant, but always present. Now, I spend my days trying to forget, trying to convince myself that it was all just a delusion. But deep down, I know the truth. The image is still out there, circulating, waiting to be opened by someone who, like me, can't resist the bizarre. And when that happens, the cycle will start again. The smile.jpg can never be defeated, because it is not just an image. It's an idea, a curse that feeds on human fear and curiosity. And I know, inevitably, that it will come for me again, sooner or later. And next time, I might not have the strength to resist. So I live in a constant state of vigilance, trapped between reality and fear. And every time I see a reflection, every time I hear a strange sound, my heart races, knowing the smile may be closer than ever. Because in the end, the curse wasn't just passed on. It's inside me, waiting, growing. And one day, I know it will consume me completely. But until then, I wait. I wait for the smile that will one day come to find me again. Before we move on to the second story, subscribe to the channel and leave a like.
Story 2. My name is Amanda, and if you're reading this, it means there's still time. Not much, but maybe enough for you to avoid the same mistake my friends and I made. Maybe I can save you. Maybe not. It all started as a joke, a stupid attempt to prove we were fearless, that the scary stories on the internet were just stories. Now I know some legends are real, and the monsters within them aren't confined to the pages they were written on. It was on a Friday night, like so many others, when we decided to dive into the deep web. Me, Julia, Lucas, and Kaio. We had been inseparable since our teenage years, and our nights of challenges were a tradition. Always looking for the next scare, the next mystery to unravel. But that night, it was Kaio who found something different. He was quiet, more than usual, as his eyes fixed on the screen gleamed with a dark excitement. "Guys, look at this," he said, turning the laptop so we could all see. On the screen, there was a simple link with no title, no description, just a sequence of random numbers and letters. "What's this?" Julia asked, already with a feeling that this wouldn't end well. "SMILE.DOG." Kaio replied with a nervous smile. "Have you heard of it?" I remember laughing, thinking he was joking. Of course we'd heard of it. Who spends enough time on the internet and hasn't? The image of the dog with that grotesque, disturbing smile. They said it was just a creepypasta, one of those horror stories circulating online, feeding the minds of the gullible. But Kaio was serious. "It's just a story, man," Lucas said, trying to dispel the growing tension. "Let's find something else." "No, listen. They say this is the original file. This is where it all started. It's just an image, but those who see it," he paused, hesitant. "Things start to happen. Bad things. Silence. No one wanted to admit it, but we were all curious. The tension in the air was almost palpable, a mix of fear and fascination that only grows when you approach something forbidden. "Let's go," Julia finally said, trying to sound brave. "It's just a picture. What could happen?" With that challenge in the air, Kaio clicked on the link. The download was quick, and the file appeared on our screen. A single image file, simply named SMILE, JPG. There was nothing special about it, just a generic icon. But we all felt something was wrong. "So, who's going to open it first?" Lucas asked, but no one answered. We were all staring at the screen as if it was about to bite us. Finally, Kaio took the lead. "I'll start. If it's a prank, at least we'll laugh afterward." He double-clicked and the image opened. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It was what we expected. A picture of a dog, similar to a Siberian husky. But there was something terribly wrong with its smile. It was too wide, the white and sharp teeth contrasting with the dark fur. Its eyes were two black holes, bottomless, and as I stared at them, I felt a chill run down my spine. "This is strange," I muttered, trying to shake off the growing sense of dread. "Strange?" Lucas laughed, but his voice trembled. "It's just a badly edited photo." "It looks real to me," Julia said, her eyes fixed on the screen. And there was something in the way she said it that made me even more uncomfortable. Kaio remained silent, his eyes glued to the image. He seemed hypnotized, unable to look away. I touched his shoulder, trying to get his attention, but he only murmured something inaudible. "Kaio." I insisted, but he didn't answer. Then, suddenly, he closed the laptop with a loud snap, almost making us jump in fright. "That was stupid," he said, breathing heavily. "Let's forget about it." But we didn't forget. When everyone went home that night, the dog's smile was still etched in my mind. I couldn't get it out of my head, as if it was lurking in the shadows of my room. I tried to sleep, but the dog's eyes seemed to follow me even with my eyes closed. And I wasn't the only one. In the days that followed, we all changed. Kaio became reclusive, stopping responding to our messages. Julia started having nightmares, always murmuring about that smile, about how it seemed to stretch wider and wider. Lucas, always the skeptic, tried to hide his fear, but his dark eyes and deep circles showed he was also being affected. As for me, well, I started seeing things. Not just in my dreams, but in reflections on screens, even in the windows of my house. Sometimes, I thought I saw the smile in the darkness, hovering, waiting. Other times, I felt a presence behind me, as if it was watching, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And then Kaio disappeared. That was just the beginning. After Kaio disappeared, panic began to set in among us. At first, we tried to rationalize it, convincing ourselves that he just needed some time alone. Kaio always had a more reserved temperament, so it was possible he was just isolating himself, as he had done before. But at the same time, a voice in the back of my mind kept repeating incessantly, "He's gone. He's gone, and we're next." The following week, Julia and Lucas started acting even stranger. Julia no longer responded to my messages, and when I visited her, she always seemed on the verge of collapse. She had become a shadow of herself, with sunken eyes and pale skin. Fear consumed her, but she wouldn't talk about it. All she did was whisper to herself, amid anguished moans, that the smile was everywhere. It was on a rainy afternoon that I finally confronted her. "Julia, you need to talk to me," I pleaded, holding her thin shoulders, trying to bring some sense of reality back to her. Her eyes stared at me, empty, as if I were a stranger. "I can't stop seeing him, Amanda," she murmured, her voice breaking. "He's everywhere. In the bathroom mirror, in the window's reflection, on my phone screen. Even when I close my eyes, he's there." A chill ran down my spine. I knew what she was talking about because I was starting to see him too. Small glimpses out of the corner of my eye, as if the smile was always lurking, waiting for me to slip up. I began to feel hunted in my own home, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. "You can't let this control you, Julia. It's just an image. A damn image on the internet." I almost screamed, more to convince myself than anything else. But Julia shook her head, tears streaming down her pale face. "It's not just an image, Amanda. It's him. He saw us, and now he won't leave us alone." She began to cry uncontrollably, her words becoming a blur of panic. I tried to comfort her, but the fear was so deeply rooted in her that it was impossible to reach her. We sat there on the bedroom floor, with the rain hitting the windows as the darkness of the night approached. It was then that Julia's phone rang. She froze, the crying stopping instantly. That sound, a banal notification, seemed to echo through the room like an omen. Julia looked at the phone in horror, as if she knew something terrible was coming. Slowly, she picked up the device with trembling hands and unlocked the screen. Her face turned even paler, if that was possible. "What is it? Julia, what are you seeing?" I asked, feeling my heart race. She showed me the screen, and my stomach turned. It was a message. No sender, no identification. Just a simple line of text. "Spread the image." Below the message, the damn photo was attached. The same dog, the same diabolical smile. Just seeing it made my mind scream in alarm, begging me to look away. But for some reason, I couldn't take my eyes off it. "What do we do?" I asked, feeling my body start to tremble. Julia shook her head frantically. We can't pass this on, Amanda. That's what he wants. That's how he spreads. If you send it to someone, you condemn them too." For the first time, the true nature of what we were dealing with became clear. It wasn't just a cursed image. It was a virus, a curse that spread through fear and despair. Anyone who saw the image would be marked, like we were. And the only way to escape, to buy time, was to condemn someone else to live the same hell. "I'm not going to do it," Julia said, throwing the phone away as if it were burning her hands. "I'd rather die than condemn someone else." But that night, when I got home, I realized it wouldn't be that easy. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the dog's grotesque smile appeared in the darkness. I spent the whole night awake, reliving the horror of seeing that, feeling as if something was moving in the shadows of my room, lurking. When the sun finally began to rise, I was exhausted, but still couldn't relax. The fear was etched into me, an invisible mark that eroded my sanity. The worst came the next day when I tried to call Julia. The phone rang, but she never answered. I went to her house, and the door was locked. No one answered my frantic knocks. I called Lucas, trying to hide my panic, but he wasn't any better. She was next, wasn't she? Lucas asked, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "I know I'm on my way too, Amanda. I can feel it. Don't say that, Lucas. We can find a way to stop this. We need to think. There's no way to stop this, he interrupted, with a dark laugh. It's like a game of Russian roulette. Only we all got the bullet. I wanted to scream, cry, do anything to pull myself out of that spiral of despair. But the truth is, I knew he was right. Julia was missing, just like Kaio. There was no longer any doubt that something sinister was hunting us. Something that started with that damn image. That night, I received the same message as Julia. No sender, no identification. Just one line of text. Spread the image. And with it, the same smile, more sinister than ever, as if it was laughing at my misery. I closed the phone immediately, feeling panic take over me. I knew I couldn't pass the image on, but at the same time, the weight of knowing my life was marked by it was unbearable. I tried to fight it, but I knew I was losing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile, felt the weight of the presence behind me, as if SMILE.DOG itself was waiting for me in the shadows. The next morning, Lucas also disappeared. Now I'm alone. Silence has become my only companion. The world around me seemed empty, as if everything was just waiting for the inevitable. All my friends had disappeared. Kaio, Julia, Lucas. They were gone, taken by something I couldn't fully understand, but that I felt every second. The messages kept coming, always the same command: spread the image. And with it, that horrible smile, which seemed to stretch, widening more and more, until it filled the entire screen. It felt like a cruel joke, as if something was enjoying my despair, laughing at my inability to do anything but wait. I started avoiding mirrors, screens, any surface that could reflect that damn image back to me. I covered the windows with sheets, turned off all the electronics in the house. I didn't want to see. I didn't want to give SMILE.DOG another chance to get closer, to completely capture me, but he found other ways. The first time I saw him outside a screen was in the kitchen. It was late at night, and I was wandering around the house, unable to sleep, when I felt a sudden chill. It wasn't just the temperature in the room, but something deeper, as if the very air had become hostile, filled with a malevolent presence. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my chest, and that's when I saw him. In the dim light of the hallway, among the shadows stretching from the floor, he was there. Not on a screen, not in a reflection, but standing, watching me with those empty eyes and that grotesque, distorted smile. My body froze, panic locking me in place. He didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there, that wide and terrifying smile contrasting with the darkness around him. I knew I should run, do anything to get away, but my body didn't respond. All I could do was stare at him, feeling as if every second beside him was draining a little more of my life. Finally, something broke inside me, and I managed to move. I ran to the bedroom, locking the door behind me, and hid under the covers, like a child trying to escape a nightmare. But there was no escape. He was there. I could feel him on the other side of the door, waiting. The smile imprinted in my mind, etched like a scar. I closed my eyes, squeezed them tightly, trying to block out that image, but he was always there, laughing in the darkness. In the following nights, I started hearing things. At first, they were just whispers, indistinct words that seemed to blend with the wind, with the sound of my own heartbeat. But as the days passed, those whispers became clearer, more insistent. They came from all corners of the house, but mainly from outside, as if something was circling the house, looking for a way in. Spread the image. The words echoed in my ears like a distorted song, repetitive, that I couldn't ignore. The pressure to share that damn photo grew with each passing moment, as if SMILE.DOG was trying to force me to drag another soul into this nightmare. But I resisted. I knew that if I gave in, I would be condemning someone to the same fate. And as much as despair consumed me, I couldn't do it. I couldn't become a monster like him. I started seeing SMILE.DOG everywhere. Sometimes, it was just a glimpse around a corner. Other times he was standing at the end of the hallway, waiting, always smiling. I couldn't get rid of him, no matter what I did. He was embedded in my mind, a living shadow that wouldn't leave me alone. So, what else could I do? Isolation was no longer enough. I fell into despair, trying to think of how I could get rid of him, how I could escape this fate that seemed sealed. I went to Julia's house, hoping to find some clue, something she might have left behind, but the house was empty, cold, as if no one had lived there for a long time. Kaio, Lucas, they had all disappeared without a trace, as if they had never existed. The truth was that even if I managed to erase the image, even if I never saw it again, it would still be there, in my mind, eating away at me from within. I was marked. SMILE.DOG saw me, followed me, hunted me, and I had nowhere to run. And that's when I received a call. An unknown number, no identification. I almost didn't answer, fear paralyzing my fingers, but something inside me forced me to do it. Amanda. The voice was low, muffled, as if the person on the other end was speaking from deep inside a tunnel. But I recognized it immediately. Kaio, is that you? Where are you? My voice was desperate, a mix of relief and terror. He got me, Amanda. He is everywhere. There's no escape. My heart tightened. Kaio's voice was distant, tired, as if he was on the verge of collapse. Kaio, please tell me where you are. We can find a way to stop this together. It's too late. Too late for me. Too late for all of us. He wants you to spread the image. And if you don't... Kaio stopped speaking for a moment, and I heard heavy breathing, as if he was struggling to stay conscious. If you don't, he will. He will get you too, Amanda. The line went dead. I screamed his name over and over until my voice gave out, but there was no response. I stood there, holding the phone to my ear, as if that could somehow keep him connected to me, as if I could prevent him from being taken. But deep down I knew he had already been taken, and that I would be next. When night fell, I felt his presence stronger than ever. SMILE.DOG was everywhere, even if I couldn't see him directly. The walls seemed to close in around me. Every shadow in the house was a threat, every noise a warning. The fear was unbearable, a constant weight on my chest, a growing pressure that told me my time was running out. I had to make a choice. Spread the image, condemning someone else to my fate, or accept that there was no escape and let SMILE.DOG take me too. With the phone still in my hand, I went to the living room and sat on the sofa, staring into the darkness that filled the house. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second echoing like a heartbeat, as I tried to find some solution, something that could save me. But there was no salvation. Finally, I made a decision. The hours passed slowly, each minute heavier than the last. I was paralyzed on the sofa, the phone weighing in my hands like an anchor. With each passing second, I felt more and more sunk into the darkness, more trapped in the fate that seemed inevitable. SMILE.DOG was there, lurking. I couldn't see him, but I could feel him. He was waiting for me to make a decision, to choose between my soul and that of another innocent. The idea of spreading the image gnawed at me from the inside. The weight of the choice was overwhelming. I knew that if I sent that picture to someone, I would be condemning that person to the same nightmare I was living. But at the same time, I knew time was running out. SMILE.DOG wouldn't wait forever. He wanted to break me, wanted me to give in to despair. He wanted me to spread his cursed smile so he could feed on more fear, more souls. I closed my eyes, trying to think of someone I hated, someone who deserved to carry this curse in my place. But I couldn't. The truth was that, as terrified as I was, there was no one I could consciously condemn to this. No matter what happened to me, I couldn't be responsible for dragging someone else into this hell. But then, a sinister idea began to form in my mind. Something so disturbing that I felt dirty just considering it. If I sent the image to a random person, someone I never met, would that make the decision easier? An anonymous person, a name picked from some random forum, someone I would never see, never know who they were? The very thought made me feel sick. But I knew SMILE.DOG was getting closer. It wasn't just the presence, but an invisible pressure that seemed to tighten around me, as if he was patiently waiting for my sanity to break. I picked up the phone and started browsing, my trembling fingers typing in random forums, discussion groups, places where no one knew me. I could find an easy victim. A stranger. Would that be enough to save me? Would SMILE.DOG accept any sacrifice? Or did he need me to feel the guilt, the remorse, for his plan to work? When I finally found a forum with unknown members, my heart raced. The name of some random user appeared on the screen. Someone from another country. Someone I would probably never meet. I took a deep breath and touched SMILE.DOG's photo, attaching it to a direct message. My hands were sweating, the terror growing with each second I hesitated. At the last second, I deleted the message. I couldn't do it. I couldn't send it. Not even to a stranger. SMILE.DOG wouldn't break me that way. If he wanted my soul, he would have to take it by force. It was then that I heard the first scratch at the door. A soft sound, almost imperceptible, but it reverberated through my body like a blow. I turned slowly, my heart racing. The scratching continued, rhythmic, as if something on the other side was just testing the barrier. I was overcome with a wave of panic. It was him. SMILE.DOG was out there, waiting, scratching at the door, as if asking to come in. The pressure to spread the image intensified, as if he was trying to force me to give in, to send the photo before he took his next step. I stood up from the sofa, my legs trembling, and approached the door. Every step seemed to bring me closer to my own end. I put my hand on the doorknob, hesitant, feeling the air around me grow colder, heavier. Spread the image. The voice didn't come from outside, but from inside my head, reverberating like a clear command. It was a simple choice. Open the door and face what was on the other side, or spread the curse, ensuring at least a little more time to live. My heart was beating so fast I thought I would faint. The doorknob was cold to the touch, and for a second, I almost opened the door. But at the last moment, I pulled my hand back. If I was going to face SMILE.DOG, I would do it my way. I went back to the sofa, feeling tears fill my eyes. I was so tired, so desperate. I wanted it all to end, but I knew I couldn't make someone else suffer in my place. I picked up the phone and opened the photo again. The dog's smile seemed even wider, as if it knew it was about to win. Suddenly, my phone vibrated, a sharp sound that made me jump. It was a video call from a number I didn't recognize. Hesitant, I answered. The image that appeared on the screen was of an unfamiliar face, a young woman, with an expression of pure confusion. She was in a dimly lit room, the background blurred. Her eyes were wide, as if she was scared. Amanda, her voice was low, uncertain. You're Amanda, right? My heart stopped. Yes, who are you? I don't know how this happened. I was browsing the internet and suddenly your number appeared on my phone. And this picture, she looked down and I knew she was talking about the SMILE.DOG photo. I don't know what's happening, but he's here. I feel like he's here. My blood ran cold. Somehow, the image had spread without me sending it. SMILE.DOG was playing by his own rules, forcing another person into this cycle of horror. Without my direct participation, the woman started crying, her face contorting in despair. I don't know what to do. What's happening? That's when the phone screen started to glitch, the image flickering and distorting, while a low sound, almost like a growl, filled the audio. The woman's face became blurred, and in its place, the malevolent smile of SMILE.DOG began to form on the screen. I screamed and threw the phone on the floor, but the sound didn't stop. The smile was there, on the broken screen, laughing, mocking me. I closed my eyes, holding my head, trying to push the vision away, but it was useless. He was there, inside my mind, taking over everything. And then, the scratching at the door stopped. I slowly lifted my head, afraid of what I might find. The house was silent, the darkness all around. My phone was silent, the smile still there, like a scar on the screen. I walked to the door, almost unconscious of my own movements, and opened it. The cold night air rushed in, wrapping around me like a blanket of ice. And there, in the middle of the street, he was. The dog, standing still, watching me with those empty eyes. His smile was even wider, if that was possible. He didn't move, just watched me, as if satisfied with the outcome. I stood there for a while, just looking at him. Part of me expected him to attack, for it to finally be over. But nothing happened. He just kept smiling. Then, without thinking, I went back inside and closed the door. I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, staring at nothing. SMILE.DOG's smile was etched into me, like a permanent mark. I knew he was still out there, waiting, maybe toying with me, and that no matter what happened, he wouldn't go away. I hadn't spread the image, but it spread anyway. And now, maybe, he was enjoying my resistance, my refusal to play by his rules. But I wouldn't give in. If he wanted to break me, he would have to do it his way, by force. The scratching at the door started again, soft, insistent. I didn't know how much time I had left, or if this would ever end. But one thing was certain. SMILE.DOG wouldn't be defeated. He was always lurking, always smiling. The phone vibrated again, a new message arriving. I picked it up with trembling hands and looked at the screen. It was the same message, as always, from an unknown number. Spread the image. I sat there, in the dark, knowing that the choice was still mine. But deep down, I knew he had already won.
Story 3. Now let's move on to the third account of the SMILE.DOG. I've always been a skeptic. Ghost stories? monsters, and curses were, in my opinion, nothing more than desperate attempts to scare the unsuspecting. I laughed at urban legends, mocked stories of supernatural encounters, and, in a way, took pride in being immune to these irrational fears. It all started one random night during one of those online chats with a friend. We were exchanging jokes, funny videos, when he sent me a link. "Open it if you dare," he wrote, followed by a laughing emoji. It was typical of him to make these jokes, always looking for ways to provoke me. I clicked on the link without hesitation, expecting some silly prank. But what I saw was different. The page loaded slowly, revealing a distorted, grainy image, as if it were a photo taken decades ago. A dog, part husky, part German shepherd, was sitting in a dark room. Its eyes were disturbingly human, with a disconcerting intensity that made me uncomfortable. But what really paralyzed me was the smile. Those white, sharp teeth, stretched in a grotesque manner that didn't seem natural. For a moment, I felt a wave of discomfort, but I quickly brushed it off. It was just a bizarre image created to shock, to induce that feeling of unease. I closed the window and laughed to myself, thinking how my friend was probably expecting me to react scared. "Is that the best you've got?" I sent the message back, trying to hide the slight unease the image had caused. He replied with just LOL, and we continued the conversation as if nothing had happened. That night, however, when I lay down to sleep, something was different. The room, normally my refuge, felt colder, the shadows longer, and there was an unsettling silence. I tried to ignore it, focusing on trivial things to distract myself, but I couldn't forget the image of that dog. Then I heard it for the first time, a soft, almost imperceptible sound, like nails lightly scratching the wood, came from the door of my room. I froze in bed, listening intently. The sound stopped as abruptly as it began, leaving the silence even more oppressive. "Just the wind," I muttered to myself, trying to rationalize, but my voice sounded weak, devoid of its usual conviction. The next morning, I woke up more tired than usual. The night had been long, filled with fragmented dreams that evaporated as soon as I opened my eyes. There was a weight on my chest, a sense that something was wrong, but I followed my routine, trying to ignore the growing discomfort. The following days were normal, or at least seemed so. But at night, the scratching sound on the door continued, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours. I would check the door every time I heard the sound, but there was never anything there. I began to blame my mind, believing it was playing tricks on me because of that ridiculous image. Until the night I heard the whispers. I was lying down, almost falling asleep, when a soft, almost inaudible voice began to fill the silence. It was as if someone was speaking right next to my ear, but the words were incomprehensible, a mix of sounds that made no sense. I got out of bed in panic, trying to locate the source of the whispers, but they dissipated as soon as I moved. The room was empty, but the discomfort remained. My heart was pounding, and I felt as if I was being watched. I tried to turn on the light, but the switch didn't work. The room remained submerged in darkness, and for a brief second, I had the impression of seeing something move in the shadow. I was on the verge of despair. Something was wrong, and I didn't know what it was. The next morning, I sent a message to my friend, telling him about the strange events, hoping he would laugh and say it was all just a big coincidence. But he didn't reply. I spent the day checking my phone, waiting for a message, but nothing. His silence was as disturbing as the events that had been haunting me. At night, I decided that I could no longer ignore what was happening. I needed to understand what was behind that link, that image, and so I decided to investigate on my own. I went online, searching for information about that image. SMILE.DOG appeared in various forums, each telling different stories, but all with a common theme: a curse. Those who saw the image were haunted by it until I stopped reading. I couldn't believe it. It didn't make sense. It was just a legend, a creepypasta, like so many others. But then, in the corner of the screen, I saw something that made me shudder. It was the same smile, that deformed smile, frozen in an expression that seemed to mock my fear. And for the first time, I felt that maybe I had made a mistake by opening that link. That night was the worst yet. Every sound, every movement in the darkness seemed charged with malicious intent. I lay in bed, but sleep didn't come. The scratching on the door began earlier, incessant, and this time, the sound was louder, more insistent. I closed my eyes, trying to block it out, but the feeling that something was out there, waiting, was suffocating. I decided that I couldn't continue like this. If I wanted to put an end to this torment, I needed to find the truth. I spent the next morning immersed in research. I found accounts of people who had received the same image, and all the stories followed a terrible pattern. After seeing the photo, strange things began to happen, driving the infected to madness, and in some cases, death. They spoke about the smile, how it would appear in the most unexpected places, always mocking, always threatening. There were even theories that SMILE.DOG was an entity, a malevolent manifestation that used the image to infiltrate people's minds, slowly devouring their sanity. I didn't want to believe it, but the events of the past few nights left me with few options. Something was wrong, something was hunting me, and I needed to find a way to end it. I continued reading, my eyes already burning with exhaustion, until I found a discussion in an obscure forum. A user, who identified himself only as Redemption75, claimed to have found a solution. According to him, the only way to break the curse was to share the image with someone else. "Pass it on and you will be free," the message said, accompanied by a warning. "But choose carefully, for the evil you unleash will never stop watching you." I felt a chill down my spine. The idea of passing this curse to someone else repulsed me, but at the same time, the desperation to get rid of it began to take hold. The more I thought about it, the more the idea became tempting. But how could I do that? And to whom? Deep down, I knew I couldn't harm anyone in this way. I was trapped, cornered by something I couldn't explain, and the only solution presented seemed as monstrous as the problem itself. However, as night approached and darkness began to invade my room again, my thoughts changed. The idea of another night tormented by the smile, by the whispers, terrified me. It was driving me insane, and I needed to find a way out. I grabbed my phone and looked through the contacts, searching for someone who might understand, someone who perhaps wouldn't take it seriously, someone who, out of curiosity or carelessness, might fall into the same trap as me. I spent an hour or more staring at the screen, but I couldn't do it. It was too cowardly. I couldn't condemn someone else to this. I threw the phone on the bed and went to the kitchen, trying to push these thoughts away. I was halfway through a glass of water when I heard it again. That sound. It was no longer a subtle scratching. It was a heavy, rhythmic knocking on my bedroom door. I felt my stomach turn, and the glass almost slipped from my hands. Each knock seemed stronger, more desperate. But what terrified me wasn't the sound. It was the silence that followed. A deep silence, broken only by a weak sigh and a low laugh, a muffled laugh, as if it were being suppressed by lips that didn't know how to produce human sound. Trembling, I returned to the bedroom. The door was closed, just as I had left it. I waited, frozen, on the other side, listening. The laugh continued, soft, almost a whisper, and it came from inside the room. Every fiber of my being screamed for me to run, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't live like this forever. I had to face it. I gathered all the courage I had left and turned the doorknob. The door opened with a long, high-pitched creak. The room was dark, the only light coming from my computer monitor, which was on, though I was sure I had left it off. The laughter ceased the moment I entered, replaced by an absolute silence. I approached the computer, the screen emitting a faint glow. The file was open, a video. Without hesitation, I pressed play. The image was shaky, grainy like a home video. At first, I couldn't distinguish what I was seeing, just shadows moving against a dark background. But then, something became clear. The camera was approaching a door. My heart raced. It was my door. The video showed a first-person view, as if someone were holding the camera while walking through my apartment. I recognized the hallway, the living room, every detail until the camera stopped in front of my bedroom door. I could hear my own tense breathing as I watched, caught in the horror of what was to come. The door in the video slowly opened, and for a moment, I saw nothing but darkness. But then, in the back of the room, something began to emerge from the shadows. The smile, that same grotesque smile, inhuman, with sharp teeth that seemed to glow in the dark. It didn't move. It was just there, in the middle of my room, looking directly at the camera, at me. I abruptly turned off the video, my heart pounding uncontrollably. I didn't know what to do. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But then, why did I feel its presence? The cold, insidious gaze watching me? And then I realized I was no longer alone. In the corner of the room where the shadows met, something moved. Two bright spots, like eyes, emerged from the darkness, and below them, the outline of the smile began to form. I didn't wait to see what would happen. I ran out of the room, locking the door behind me, my body trembling with pure terror. I didn't know where to go or what to do, but I knew I couldn't stay there. As I fled the apartment, I could hear the sound of something scratching at the door again, followed by a low laugh that echoed through the empty hallway. I was being hunted, and there was nowhere to run. The streets were deserted when I left the building. The cold night air couldn't calm me, and every shadow seemed to hide invisible threats. I had no destination in mind, just the need to get away from whatever was chasing me. My heart hammered in my chest, the echo of that laugh still pulsing in my ears. Every step was an effort not to give in to panic, not to look back, afraid of what I might find. I knew I couldn't go back home, but the question that tormented me was, where to go? Nowhere seemed safe. As I walked through the dimly lit streets, I remembered the stories I read of people who tried to escape SMILE.DOG and failed miserably. Most of them disappeared without a trace, and the few that remained, well, their accounts weren't encouraging. I ended up taking refuge in a 24-hour cafe, one of those places that never close and always have a strange clientele at night. The feeling of being among other people, even strangers, gave me a false sense of security. I ordered a strong coffee and sat in the back of the establishment, with my back to the wall, where I could watch everyone around me. I tried to rationalize what was happening. Maybe it was just an elaborate prank, some sick joke, but the image of that smile never left my mind. As I took a bitter sip of coffee, an idea began to form. Maybe if I could discover the origin of SMILE.DOG, I could find a way to get rid of it. The internet was full of rumors, but what if there was something concrete? A lead I could follow. I picked up my phone, hesitating for a moment before opening the browser. I was afraid of what I might find, but desperation pushed me forward. I went straight to the forums I had visited earlier, but this time I looked for more specific information. The origin of the image, who created it, how it spread. There were many theories, but few concrete answers. Then, in a post buried under old comments, I found something interesting. A user mentioned a woman named Mary E., who was supposedly one of the first victims of the curse. According to the story, she was an investigative journalist who, while working on a piece about urban legends, came into contact with the image, and after that, her life fell apart. Records indicated that Mary was found dead under mysterious circumstances, and that before she died, she tried to warn others about the image. I managed to find more details about her. Mary was known for her investigative work in paranormal cases, always seeking to debunk frauds and expose the truth. But with SMILE.DOG, something went wrong. She went from skeptic to victim, and her last message left online was a desperate plea for people not to open the image. This story gave me chills, but it also gave me a lead. Maybe someone involved in her case knew something more. I followed the references to a name. Dr. Lawrence Huberman, a psychiatrist who allegedly treated Mary in her final days. According to what I read, he kept personal files on the case, notes that were never made public. Without thinking twice, I searched for his contact information. A quick search revealed that Dr. Huberman was a reclusive man, but he still lived in the city, in a secluded neighborhood. I knew what I was about to do was insane, but I saw no other alternative. I paid for the coffee and hurried out of the establishment, ignoring the curious glances of the other customers. The closer I got to Dr. Huberman's address, the more fear began to take hold. But I had no choice. If anyone knew how to end this curse, it would be him. The neighborhood was grim, consisting of narrow streets and old houses, with trees whose twisted branches looked like hands trying to grasp the sky. When I arrived at his house, I hesitated. The building was large, with old architecture, and looked abandoned. The windows were covered in dust, and the front door, massive and dark, seemed to have seen better days. I knocked on the door 3 times, which echoed ominously. I waited, feeling my heart beat faster with each passing second. Just as I was about to give up, the door slowly opened, revealing an old man with tired eyes and disheveled white hair. His expression was one of curiosity, mixed with something that seemed like pity. "You're another one, aren't you?" he asked, his voice hoarse and low. "I need your help, Dr. Huberman." My voice came out trembling, almost pleading. He looked at me for a long moment before nodding and stepping aside to let me in. The house was dark and smelled of mold, with old furniture and piles of books scattered everywhere. I was led to a small office, where he sat behind a massive wooden desk, indicating for me to sit as well. "What do you know about SMILE.DOG?" I asked, getting straight to the point, trying not to show the panic I was feeling. Dr. Huberman sighed deeply, as if he had been expecting this question. "More than I'd like to know, unfortunately. Mary E. was my patient, and what happened to her?" He shook his head, as if the words were difficult to form. "She was one of the first, but not the only one. I tried to help, but the image, it has a power we can't comprehend. It affects the mind, distorts reality, and whoever sees it never forgets. But is there a way to get rid of it?" My voice sounded desperate. He looked at me with a somber expression. "There's no cure. There's no escape. The only way Mary found was..." He hesitated, and for the first time he seemed truly shaken. "She took her own life. But even so, the image, it's still there, waiting, spreading." My head was spinning. His words echoed in my mind, mixing with the laughter that seemed to never cease. I was lost, with no way out. But then he added something that made me freeze. "There is a way to delay it." He opened a drawer and pulled out a small glass bottle containing a thick, dark liquid. "This won't solve the problem, but it can buy you some time. It calms the mind, inhibits the influence of the image, but only temporarily." I took the bottle, my hands trembling. Was this it? A temporary solution? But before I could thank him or ask more questions, I heard a sound coming from the hallway. A soft scratching, followed by a low, drawn-out laugh. Dr. Huberman paled, his eyes wide with fear. "He's here," he whispered. Suddenly, the room's light began to flicker, and a long, distorted shadow started to form on the wall. It was the smile stretching, as if it were coming out of the depths of the darkness. The laughter grew louder, echoing throughout the house, and I felt the floor tremble beneath my feet. Dr. Huberman suddenly stood up, pulling me out of the office. "Get out!" he shouted. "Get out of here and don't come back." I was pushed toward the front door, still clutching the bottle tightly. Before I could react, he threw me out, slamming the door behind me with a bang. I ran like never before. The laughter still echoed around me, as if the night itself was mocking me. When I finally stopped, my legs ached and sweat was dripping down my face. I looked back at the dark street, but there was no sign of anything. Finally, I collapsed to my knees, exhausted, and let out a primal scream into the night. I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. And worst of all, I knew that the only thing standing between me and SMILE.DOG was that bottle, which now seemed useless in my trembling hands. I barely remembered how I got home that night. Every corner, every shadow seemed to hide something lurking, watching me with those bright eyes, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. When I finally closed the apartment door, I felt as if I had let something in with me. The air was dense, heavy, and the silence was oppressive. I held the bottle tightly, Dr. Huberman's words echoing in my mind. He said this would give me some time, that it would calm the image's influence. But for how long? And what would happen when the effect wore off? I looked at the bottle. The dark liquid seemed to pulse, almost as if it had a life of its own. I remembered Dr. Huberman's terrified look and the sound of that thing inside his house. There was something more in those shadows, something that seemed to grow each night, becoming more audible, more present. I knew I couldn't delay any longer. There was nowhere else to run, no one else to turn to. I was alone. I looked around, realizing how much my life had been reduced to a single goal: survive one more night. I took the cap off the bottle and, without thinking much, poured it down my throat. The taste was bitter, almost metallic, and made me shudder. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a slight numbness began to spread through my head, like a soft blanket enveloping my mind. The agitation, the constant fear that had been consuming me, began to recede, becoming more distant, almost forgettable. I took a deep breath, feeling a bit more in control, but the sense of security was tenuous, fragile. The smile was still there, somewhere, waiting. I stayed in the apartment, waiting for something to happen. The hours passed slowly, each minute loaded with tension. Outside, the darkness seemed denser than ever, as if the world itself had been enveloped in shadows. But nothing happened. The night unfolded with a strange calm. No scratching at the door, no whispers, no laughter. For the first time in days, I managed to sleep. I woke up the next morning, with sunlight filtering through the curtains, bringing a momentary sense of relief. Maybe the bottle had worked. Maybe that thing had gone away. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The day passed slowly, as if time itself was struggling to move forward. I couldn't concentrate on anything, and every noise, no matter how small, made my heart race. When night fell again, the dread returned with full force. What awaited me this time? What would happen when the protection from the bottle wore off? It didn't take long for me to start feeling the difference. The numbness that enveloped me the night before was wearing off, and the fear started to seep back in. It seemed that the shadows in my apartment were lengthening, as if something invisible was trying to emerge from them. I was lying in bed, forcing my eyes to stay open, when I felt it. It was as if the air in the room had changed density, becoming heavier, thicker. The darkness shifted, and then I heard it. A soft, familiar scratching. But this time it wasn't coming from the door. It was the sound of something slowly moving, directly from the back of my room. The laughter came next, low and drawn out, but very close, as if it was at the foot of the bed. I refused to look, knowing that any movement might be the trigger that thing was waiting for. But the fear, the pure, terrifying curiosity, made me turn my head. And then I saw it. SMILE.DOG was there, exactly like in the image. But now it wasn't just a static figure in a photo. It was alive, its eyes glowing in the darkness, and that smile. It was worse than anything I could have imagined. It wasn't just a smile. It was a promise of pain, of madness, of a fate I couldn't escape, couldn't move. I was paralyzed, my gaze locked on the sickly eyes of that creature. Its laughter intensified, echoing in my skull, twisting my thoughts. Everything seemed to distort around me, as if reality itself was bending to its will. Then it began to move towards me. Slowly, with disturbing precision, it advanced. I felt my body tremble, cold sweat running down my skin. I wanted to run, scream, do anything to get away, but my muscles refused to respond. I was trapped in terror. When it finally stopped beside the bed, the room fell into complete silence. The smile was now so close that it seemed to fill my entire field of vision, the shadows molding around it, as if it were the center of a vortex of nightmares. The laughter ceased, replaced by low, controlled breathing. It was as if the thing was savoring the moment, absorbing the fear that emanated from me. It leaned in, bringing its grotesque snout close to my face. I could smell something rotten, a mix of blood and rust that turned my stomach. And then it whispered, not with words, but with something deeper, more visceral, that infiltrated my mind. I felt my thoughts unravel, as if they were being devoured from within. I closed my eyes in a futile attempt to block out that presence. But it was inside me now, its influence growing, devouring my memories, my emotions, my sanity. The image of SMILE.DOG was etched in my mind, impossible to erase. Every time I blinked, I saw that smile, those sharp teeth, those penetrating eyes that seemed to search my soul. When I finally had the courage to open my eyes again, it was gone. The room was empty, but I knew it was still there, lurking, waiting for the right moment to return. The laughter echoed in my mind, incessant, like a sinister clock marking the time I had left. I knew I couldn't fight it, and the idea of passing the image to someone else, though tempting, repulsed me. I couldn't condemn anyone to this. But then, what was left? I sat on the bed, my face buried in my hands, desperately trying to think of a solution. But no matter how hard I tried, all I could hear was that laughter. All I could see was that smile. The hours dragged on until the first ray of sunlight invaded the room. I had survived the night, but at what cost? I knew this wouldn't end, that the thing was just beginning. My mind was already fractured, but not completely destroyed. There was still a thread of sanity, a minimal awareness that resisted. But for how long? I knew I couldn't continue like this. There was nowhere to run, no way to hide. And slowly, an idea began to form. The only way to end this, to break the cycle, would be to accept it. Let it consume me, let it do what it wanted. I knew it was an insane thought, but at the same time, it seemed like the only way out. I got out of bed, my body trembling with exhaustion, and approached the mirror in the hallway. My reflection was distorted, as if the glass was fogged. For a moment, I saw something that wasn't me. The smile appeared there, in the mirror, curving grotesquely, mocking me. But this time, I didn't feel fear. I felt a strange kind of resignation. SMILE.DOG had won, and maybe by allowing it, I could finally find some kind of peace. Or maybe I was just about to lose what was left of me. The mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces as I punched it with all my strength. The cracks reflected my face, but at the same time, I saw SMILE.DOG's reflection in each fragment, multiplied, spreading its smile everywhere, surrounding me, trapping me. I sat on the floor, laughing quietly, uncontrollably, its laughter now mixed with mine, until they became one. I knew I was no longer alone. It was with me, inside me, forever. And as darkness began to swallow my apartment once more, I understood the final truth. You can't defeat SMILE.DOG. It's eternal, a virus in the mind, a never-ending curse. I would be just another in the cycle, another victim, spreading the smile, perpetuating the horror. When night fell again, I was ready. This time, I didn't resist. I let the darkness take me, eyes wide open, watching the smile that was now part of me. And in those last moments of sanity, I realized the ambiguity of it all. Maybe it never hunted me. Maybe from the start it was just waiting for me to accept it. And now I accepted it. The smile widened, and I smiled back. If you enjoyed these stories, subscribe to the channel and make sure to check out the next story playing on the screen.